welcome to This Week in Civics with the Bill of Rights Institute. My name is Rachel Davison-Humphreys, and this is This Week in Civics. I'm Director of Outreach at BRI, and every week we come together to talk to you about what's happening in civics, what's happening in history this week, and what's happening at the Bill of Rights Institute. And we'd love to hear from you. We are live streaming on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube every week this time, so we can talk about what's going on. So reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. So this week, we are talking about Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So America is this glorious nation of immigrants with contributions from every country, ethnicity, and race. And while not all were always treated with the same liberties under the law, every group has contributed in profound ways to our communities. And we take the month of May, because May has some significant historical importance for this community, to honor Asian and Pacific Islanders and look at the unique ways that Asian Americans have contributed to our communities and society as a whole. So one of the concerns that I always have is how do we honor these groups while also honoring and uplifting them, while also recognizing the difficulties under which they came and existed in the US at various points. So the first immigration law was actually restrictive and directed at Asians. It was the Chinese Immigration Act. Then we also had the World War II war relocation centers, which imprisoned nearly 130,000 Japanese, 80,000 of which were born in America. If you want to learn more about this, I really recommend the excellent Manzanar National Historic Site. So we never want to, when honoring and uplifting these communities, we never want to gloss over or overlook the difficulties and tragedies they had to overcome. Instead, we want to look at those and be clear and plain with those, but don't let that distract from the incredible communities and work that these different groups have and contribute to. So I want to know what stories you're telling this week. Are you telling stories of the senators and representatives that spoke up against the Chinese Exclusion Act, or those Chinese businessmen that went against it? There are really important questions and discussions that can happen out of that about justice and what our responsibility is to Americans who are already in the US versus those who want to become American. My favorite story to talk about during Asian American Heritage Month is actually this amazing photo. I'm not sure if you've seen it. We linked to an AP article in the chat and comments. There's this photo of three Asian women, a Japanese woman, an Indian woman, and a Syrian woman from 1883. Their names, if you're not familiar with that photo, I highly recommend looking at it because it's fascinating, because the subtitle says that these are all medical students, but it's 1883. And I love the idea that in the 1880s, Anandabi Joshi, also called Joshi, from India, Keiko Okama from Japan, and Sabat Isambulu from Syria were all medical students in Pennsylvania at a Quaker medical school, because Quakers were some of the only people in the world at the time that were allowing women to study medicine. And all three of these women graduated, and each of them became the first woman from their respective countries to get a degree in Western medicine. They went back, they practiced, they were able to follow, or the university was able to keep in touch with Joshi and Keiko. Sabat, they lost touch with after she went to Egypt, but they do know she went and practiced medicine back in Syria. And I love this photo because to me, this is a historical moment that kind of highlights the best of America: opportunity and grit and self-creation and equality. And it just, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Like I said, there's a link to it in the chat. The other resources that BRI has, we actually put together a whole playlist on Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, where you can look at some of the history of different ways different ethnic groups and racial groups have interacted with US law, but also honoring different people like Fred Korematsu. So BRI has a ton of different resources on Fred Korematsu because of his landmark case against the US government. We have a video that honors him as a person. We also have a DBQ that looks at his case. We have e-lessons. So in the playlist, there's a huge list for Fred Korematsu. And then we also have a great lesson on the 442nd Japanese American Unit during World War II. And I recommend you look at that too. It looks at what they and how they sacrificed themselves in the aftermath of Pearl Harbor, when they volunteered with the US government forces in the aftermath of Pearl Harbor. And I'm wondering what other stories you're telling. Are you telling stories of the LA riots and the Korean American protectors there in 1992? Are you telling stories of amazing contributions in STEM, of the incredible grit and fortitude which different ethnic and immigrant groups had in different communities? I would love to hear from you. Again, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'd love to hear what you're telling, what you're talking about. America is still a huge draw of Asian immigrants from India and China, especially for our STEM communities in medicine, higher education, and industry. And while America is rooted in equality, and it's our responsibility to respect, honor, and support all Americans, I'm really glad that we get the chance to highlight a few Asian Americans in this episode while thinking about the accomplishments of the many. And if there are some favorite stories you love to tell, I would love to hear from you. So reach out to us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. I am Rachel Davison-Humphreys. I'm here every week. Citizenship is really hard work. We are a pluralistic democracy that has a lot of voices that need to be amplified and heard. So be out there, use your voice to the best of your ability, and I look forward to seeing you next